Hey guys, what is up? Welcome to the Guilty as Charged podcast presented by the Chargers Podcast Network. My name is Steven and I'm the host as always, and joining me is my guy Tyler. Tyler, what's up, man? How you doing today?
Stoked, man. We got a great interview for you guys. Probably my favorite one that we've done on this channel so far. Just a very candid, spectacular interview. That's next.
Yes, it is next. We are joined by the wonderful Kris Rhim of ESPN. He was a late addition to the beat for the Chargers this season. We had a great time picking his brain about, adjusting from Baltimore to the Chargers and everything that kind of went through this season and his experience covering it, moving to a new team, all that good stuff. Had a great conversation with him. Hopefully you guys enjoy it. Obviously we get to, cover the Chargers head coaching search as well as the GM search. And he had some great insight on both of those fronts. Tyler, did you have any takeaways without spoiling from our interview with Kris?
Ooh, just the process of being a reporter and then, of course, weighing experience versus being a first-time head coach. I think those two things are things you guys should keep an eye on when you listen to this interview.
Yeah, I definitely agree there. If you are a pro Harbaugh person, I think you'll be very happy with what Kris has to say as well. That being said, Tyler and I are fans of the team just like you guys are. We've been given this platform and are very grateful for it. But the opinions that we share on this platform are ours and ours alone. They do not always reflect the opinions of the Chargers organization themselves. At the end of the day, we are content creators and we create content and have a great time doing it. So, like I said, very excited for this one. The interview did go a bit longer than usual. Sometimes we go back and forth about, doing a post takeaway. So this is just going to be the interview. So again, cannot thank Kris enough for joining us. And hopefully you guys enjoy the interview. And that being said, we'll see you next week. As always, bolt up. All right, guys. Very happy now to be joined by Mr. Kris Rhim of ESPN, a new addition and a great addition, I might add, to the Chargers beat this year. So, Kris, thanks so much for taking the time to join us today, man. How you doing?
Good. Appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, we're all very excited. You were, like I mentioned, sincerely, a great addition to the Chargers beat, and we've loved reading your articles. And so we're going to pick Kris's brain about kind of the postmortem of the 2023 season. We'll also, ask him about some of the, opinions of the coaching and GM searches that are going on right now, and really excited to dive in here. So, Kris, first and foremost, I think there's a lot of talk right now about, the Baltimore Ravens and pulling from the Baltimore Ravens. You obviously, used to cover the Baltimore Ravens as well. So I want to ask you first and foremost, what was your mindset coming from Baltimore to start covering the Chargers? How did you kind of go about, the whole process of making that adjustment, and what was kind of your goal, on the Chargers beat?
Yeah, well, I think leaving Baltimore, coming to the Chargers, the goal is to just, get through the season and get to know, every player on the team, to be honest, like, whose number, whatever player's number is, figuring who that is. Cause I could tell you, when I left Baltimore, I could tell you, everybody's, name, number, where they're from, so, but that was because I was there from training camp. So imagine, it's week 3 and I don't, I never really watching the Chargers, I know the stars, right. But I don't know, the 53rd guy or, 70th guy. So that was really the biggest thing, is just getting through the year, writing good stuff, writing good, stories. And yeah, that was really the biggest goal in transition.
How does it work for you when you're covering a team that a lot of expectations, right? I think they're going to do well, going to make the postseason, all sorts of stuff. We should be watching them this week or last weekend. What's it like when that team starts to clearly not be headed in that direction? How do you manage expectations? Maybe even the fans that are reading your content. How do you manage that as you start to see the Chargers maybe not headed towards the postseason, but you don't want to outright just say, season's over, let's hang it up?
Yeah, well, when that happens, everything gets tense. Everyone, maybe people who were nice aren't so nice anymore. Maybe, maybe a guy who always talked isn't talking anymore. And then you have to have a balance between, what question do I want to ask that I need to write for my story that's, my boss wants me to ask. And, I know that this question is going to piss off the person that I'm asking it to because of how tense it is. So that's what it is. When the season goes downhill and you're a team that it's expected not to go downhill, and you're in year 3, and you know that your job is on the line, not only from coaches, but everyone in the organization, right? A player, coach, they know what's at stake just as we know what's at stake, right? And you're asking a person with a family, with these questions that are tough, and from their vantage point, can seem unfair at times, can at the basic level hurt your feelings. So when things are just tense, it's just super tense. It's not a it's like the the nature of the job though, but it's tense.
I think especially, coming from a place that has had the same coach for a very long time to dealing with, the coach on the hot seat kind of mentality. I would imagine that would be kind of a tough adjustment as you're like, you're trying to figure everything out. And then also you're like, hey, like I've got to cover a coach who might be out of a job here in a few weeks.
Yeah, well, you got to imagine too, like it's the difficult part about when I came in was I came in after the Chargers had just began the season 0-2 after blowing a 27-point lead in the playoffs. Like there's no grace period for me to get on the beat and hey, what are you guys expecting this year? What
Right.
like how, you know what I mean? Like there's no period for me to get on the beat and just start asking, stuff to ingratiate myself in like a comfortable way, get to know people. It's just boom. You guys are meeting expectations, so that I think that's difficult because, it's like, who is this guy for one? And then it's, but it's also like, understanding that that's my job. Right. And, you got to do what you got to do.
Well, clearly, even though things were very difficult, you were able to talk to players and you're able to maintain relationships or even just find a relationship with those players in a very short amount of time to the point where you're able to write what I think was the article that I think most people will remember your season, at least this season for, which was that most recent one, but the big one at the end there. Why a disconnected Chargers team was Brandon Staley's downfall. Walk me through the process of collecting that information and even sort of like you've already talked about, just having to be careful with asking certain questions and certain players and that sort of thing.
Well, yeah, I think again when things are tense, when things aren't going well, when the screws are getting tightened, people start talking. I think the key thing with that article to point out too is that it's interesting is like his entire Brandon's tenure, right? Like, and I said it at the beginning, but like they were so close to success. They were as close to success as they were to disaster for 3 years, right? I mean, the third year it went off the rails, but how many one score? I don't have the stats, but how many one score games did they lose, right? So it's like for all that was reported, the disconnect, the whatever it may be, right? There's a lot of not saying it didn't matter because it doesn't matter because that's where I reported it, but there are disconnected teams that win, and this team was close to winning, right? And I think some of that disconnect could have led to why they win, and that's kind of what I was trying to point out why this season went the way it did. From they're a team that's going 9-8 or 10-7 to what we saw this year is 5-12, right? That doesn't make any sense. So I think for me, coming into the locker room or coming into the organization, I think I'm a younger guy. A lot of the people around there, we listen to the same stuff, we talk the same way. You might have grown up the same way. I'm from Philly. If I'm from Philly and you're from Brooklyn or you're from LA or Detroit, it's pretty much the same thing. So we talk about the same stuff. We get along with each other, and then they trust me and tell me things that I don't say, and then they give me the okay to go with things that they're comfortable with me going with. You know what I mean? So it's 90%. Probably 10% of the stuff that people ever read is like, what should I say? All the stuff that people read is like 10% of what I know. And I think that goes for like every reporter or what I have, right? Because again, you got to weigh that balance of what you're doing, what bridges you're going to burn, the risk and the value assessment. Also, if people are just comfortable saying stuff. So that's why I'll say that story came together. If that answers the question.
Yeah, I think that definitely does. I think, there's obviously a lot of, fresh feelings and fresh thoughts about the way things ended from a negativity standpoint. And obviously, the Chargers are where they are right now because of the way the season unfolded. But did you have kind of a more positive highlight of the year for you? You moved to a new city, Khalil Mack, right away, your first game has a 6-sack performance. Did you have a moment or a story this season that was kind of on the more positive side, of when you look back and reflect on the season that you can be, really happy about, being able to have that kind of connection to the story?
Yeah, I think that a positive that I'll point to is at least in one story. I It wasn't like a story that took me a lot of time, but I put a lot of stuff in. But I sort of story about Giff and how he kind of went over the locker room in like 2 weeks, and um, I don't know. I don't know why I like that story so much, but which is funny because originally there was the wrong cover photo for the story. It was the former quarterbacks coach, so that was crazy. But I yeah, I think that when Giff took over, it was like you couldn't interview a player and ask a player about Giff and them not start smiling. Like it's the weirdest thing ever. Like it wasn't like, there are coaches where guys dislike, and then there are coaches that guys like. But then there's like, I think Giff and Ryan Ficken are the guys who, if you ask a player about Giff or Fick, they're like smiling. Like it's not like they're like, yo, that guy's a good dude. It's like as soon as you could, Derwin was at the podium and he was talking about something. I think someone must have asked a question because it was the game when he played star the entire game. So we're asking about that, and he's obviously he's not smiling about answering those questions. And then the next question was about Giff, and he's ear to ear, like Khalil, Austin, like Alohi, So I think that story was cool to write because I was just surprised. I had never seen people just talking about a coach like that and smiling like in the way like that people were. So they clearly liked him a lot.
Yeah, Giff Smith, I mean, been with the team through 3 head coaches, 3 different stadiums, 2 different cities, been there, done that, knows a lot of these guys. What was that period like? How did you find out, obviously, about the switch? And then what was that, like that first 24, 48 hours like for you and the beat writers, the locker room, et cetera?
Yeah, I mean, not saying any reporting, but I think we all knew. I had my story pre-written. I had all the stuff ready to go. I didn't know who was going to be the interim head coach. I thought it might be Ficken, but Giff surprised me that he was the interim just because he wasn't someone I was thinking of, thinking it might be Fick or maybe Kellen or something like that. But I think, well, firstly, just the period of Giff, I think the organization made the right choice. Like, I think he was the right person for the moment. Like, for the moment, he was great. Even though they didn't win, I thought that was the right person to like galvanize his group, right? Like, Giff kind of feels like a Friday Night Lights type of coach, like the Southern drawl, like he was the complete opposite of his predecessor. Like, it was like, Brandon will give you these detailed, super, long-winded answers, and good though, like, deep into football and leaned into analytics, and he felt very like some type of 2030 car or something, whereas Giff is like that old 1950s, like he's he's making joke, he's gonna rhyme, he's gonna tell you I don't know, like if you ask him about the medical stuff, I'm not a doctor, he just he's just that kind of dude. But the 24 hours after, I think you're trying to decide when you want to go to sleep or how you're going to go to sleep. You have to catch a flight back to LA, and something's going to happen. So it's like the news broke, and my Uber is coming to the hotel to pick me up. And I have stuff pre-written, but I still have to update some things. Do this and that, and editors calling me. So I think Jeff Miller was on the highway. I think everybody. Pop might have been in the air. So everybody's somewhere when it's happening, but you just got to figure it out, buy the plane Wi-Fi or, tell the Uber my bad. I need a couple more minutes. That was what it was like for 24 for the 24 to 48. It was just trying to figure out. Yeah, it was trying to figure out where I was going to be when the news broke. Trying to figure out who else is going to be retained, who's going to be let go, and trying to come up with candidates and figure out the next steps and put together the story I've been working on.
That's tell the Uber to wait for a minute as the meter runs high. Shifting gears here for a little bit, I think the Chargers obviously in a GM search, in a coaching search, and they're going to have some tough decisions with the big four, so to speak, of Khalil Mack, Joey Bosa, Keenan Allen, Mike Williams. What do you make of that? Because there's a lot of cap hell sentiments out there that the Chargers are just in a really status of a cap sheet that is not conducive towards like hiring a great GM candidate, and the future is all bleak and everything like that. In terms of the big four, like, what do you make of their situations, and how would you think that the Chargers could kind of go forward in a positive manner with the big four and their contracts?
Yeah, well, I don't know if it's I don't think it's as bad as people describe it. Like, I was in Atlanta a few years ago when Terry Fontenot and Arthur Smith took over, and that was like cap hell. I think they were, I don't know, it had to be close to 50 million when they took it. This season was their first year clearing the cap hell that they were in. That's how bad it was. And I don't think this team is in that situation. I think there are clear steps that a GM can take to fix the roster in a sense, right? To, get out of that cap, hell quickly. And a lot of it starts with the big four. I think that the challenge, again, like, that these are people, again, like that's the first challenge, right? Like, it's easy to say, like, we'll just cut this person and looking at it as numbers. But I do think that personnel and teams, when you're doing not a rebuild at all, but next year is going to be a new version of the Chargers in this GM's vision. For the first time in 11 seasons, it'll be a different GM, vision, and first time in 3 seasons, a different coach's vision, and how much of that vision, and instilling it and instilling the culture that you want to build, do you need those vets or those guys in the locker room who have been there and to help you, get what you want to get built. And so in making those decisions, I think specifically with a guy like Keenan and, even Khalil, I think that's when it becomes tough with them, specifically because Keenan's been here forever. He knows he's Phillip Rivers to Herbert, and he's publicly said, I don't want to go anywhere. He's he just had the year of his career. And I think that when you have a guy that good, who's been here that long, who's saying, I want to be here, you figure out a way to make it work with a guy like that. And I think Khalil, the way he spoke, in his end of the season presser, it kind of sounded like he was leaving it up into the new GM's hand, but he was also, talking about, I want to win a Super Bowl. And, he kind of didn't answer the question about if he still believes he can do that here. I could see him, the team, wanting to send him to a team maybe in a that they believe is better positioned to contend next year and win a Super Bowl. So I could see that happening, but he's also a guy that organized team dinners that when he walks in the locker room, everybody's like, this is the guy, right? Everybody respects him. He's a clear leader, right? Talking about some of the most respected guys, I think Khalil and Keenan are, 1 and 2, or, Justin's up there too, and Derwin's up there too, but whoever you want to, put in that top 4, they're there. So those two, I would say, especially the way they played last year, you're in a unique situation, you might be able to trade, whatever. I think Mike and Joey, with the injuries, the past season for Joey, and then this year with Mike and their cap hits, I think, a GM will have to make a decision, do you want to restructure a deal again and push money down the road, or do you want to, maybe, send these guys out? But again, it's that element of they both have been here. But that's how I see it. I think I think a GM would split that group up into two, and I think it'll be some tough decisions either way. I just don't like the like ultimatums, like what I would do, like I would cut someone or I would,
Sure.
um, so that's like a running around a circle way to answer your question.
No, that's
I
perfect.
respect
And you've
it.
been very candid with us so far. So please don't feel like you have to share every single possible thing. It's tough, and the tough part is that one, you don't know when the Chargers are going to be in contention again. Is it as soon as next year? If not, is it 2025? And you'll have to ask the GMs that. And then with these players, Khalil Mack, Keenan Allen, they have career years, great years. That also means their value goes up. So if you're trying to trade this player, their value goes up. So it's a very, very tough situation. I certainly don't envy the next GM. And the Chargers are looking for a GM who's going to, quote unquote, reimagine what it means to be a general manager and run a team and do certain things. What do you feel that could mean? Or even just what do you feel the best GMs are the ones that really innovate the process? What could they do? What are they looking for in these GMs, do you think?
Yeah, that the word reimagined was it was certainly a choice in the statement, and I believe John Spanos was asked about it, and I think he just described it as just this next phase of the Chargers, and just a new version of the team, right? But yeah, I guess in a new GM, I think what you look for, it's interesting. I think with hiring new people because you don't know who's going to be good. You can say that there are indicators from a general manager level, who you've scouted or who you've been around, right? I think it's a lot of that, right? Like if you were within a radius of Sean McVay, like at a certain point, like
Yeah.
you might just get tapped, if you've been around Howie Roseman, if you've been around certain guys, certain people, and that matters, right? Because you know how they think, how the organization worked, and you want to implement that winning into yours. So I think they're just looking for at the basic level what everybody's looking for, right? Like someone who can win, right? Like someone who can. I don't think there's like Tom did a bunch of stuff wrong, and we're looking for a guy that does like these things well, right? It's just like we're just looking for the guy, right? We're just looking for a guy who's going to do it well, and I think you see the people that they're interviewing, and they're from organizations with pedigree with winning. And I think that that shows that what they're looking for.
Yeah, you mentioned those previous organizations. A lot of GM candidates this year do have ties to Harry Roseman and the team you used to cover, the Baltimore Ravens. What do you think it is about that combination that teams could be looking for? Because honestly, like you pull up any bio of all these candidates and they worked for the Eagles, they worked for the Ravens. What is it about those two organizations and the way they operate that kind of cultivates this culture of building future GM candidates?
Yeah, I think they have a, a a history of sticking to what's worked for them. You look at the Eagle, and that's like a basic way to answer it. But I think you look at the Eagles, right? Um, Look at Howie Roseman's drafts, right? Like he's going to draft a D lineman or he's going to draft an O lineman like 9 times out of 10
Yeah.
in the first 2 rounds, and he's not drafting a linebacker in the first 3 rounds probably, right? And if they do draft someone else like a receiver, they might miss, So you look at the Eagles and how they've won. It's always at the line of scrimmage, and they've never changed that for the since before Howie, right? It's there's Fletcher Cox, and then they're drafting Jordan Davis, and there's Nolan Smith, and then there's Hargrave, and there's you look back and back and back. They've always done it that way. Then with the Ravens, you want these linebackers, and I want a physical cornerback, and I'll figure out the rest. I think that's how they've always been, and I think some of the best organizations stick to what's winning and what works best, and that's the simplest way to answer it.
Yeah, I'm fascinated because, again, new GM for the first time in a very long time. So Chargers fans sort of understood that there was a certain type, maybe at like receiver or at edge rusher, whether it's arm length or 40 or whatever it was, but now who knows? Who honestly knows what's going to happen? As far as switching to head coach now, Chargers fans are very Jim Harbaugh or bust. I don't think that is necessarily the case, but that's what Chargers fans seem to be going for. But overall, how do you feel the Chargers process has played out? Is there something you're keeping an eye on? What has been your attention? What have your attention been on so far throughout this whole process?
Man, I think they've casted a super wide net. I think they're interviewing a lot of good candidates, a lot of um, different people. Maybe, well, I guess none that I guess really didn't expect, but I guess like Leslie Frazier, was a name. Maybe I didn't know if he would get interviewed here, but yeah, I think the good part about interviewing is you can when you cast a wide net and you interview all these people, you get to grab certain things from certain people, right, and put it in your back pocket. You get to, how does this thought process work here? Or how did guys do this there? And you can suggest that to your new people, right? So I think that's important. And again, I'm not big on criticizing who teams interview or who they don't interview because I've learned and I've been wrong in my group chats with friends about some person that for some reason I was like, oh, that's interesting that they're interviewing this person, and then that person's a phenomenal head coach, or or a opening day press conference, whether it's Jonathan Gannon or I don't know. We've seen these opening press conferences where they look kind of wonky, and you're like,
Dan
oh
Campbell
man,
biting kneecaps. Did it do it for you?
Dan
Yep.
Campbell, yeah, Dan Campbell. They and then they turn out to be great.
Yeah.
So I think whoever the Chargers interviewed, I would have said it was good because because you can't say, at least for me, I'm never gonna be like, what has that person done to, because I've been wrong too many times to say that. But I think the people but with that being said, they've interviewed all people who I believe if they hired any of these people, I would say okay. And I think that goes, down the line. And I would say that makes sense. And they started with the internal people, which I think is the right thing to do. And yeah, so I think they're going about it the right way.
Obviously, the cycle is not over yet, but just like my perspective is that I feel like there are more interviews this time around, specifically of like the head coaching candidates. It feels like they said they were going to cast a wide net, and they've done that. And there's obviously a group of candidates that they could still interview later this week. I know they have an appointment with Dan Quinn and a request with Ben Johnson and Raheem Morris that are still kind of, waiting out there. In terms of Jim Harbaugh, what do you make of his chances of leaving? Because obviously the fan base is very pro Harbaugh. Do you think that, I know Jeremy Fowler reported today that chances are unlikely that he does return to Michigan. Are you buying that, or do you think that he could be using leverage here to get a bigger payday at Michigan?
Yeah, I never met Jim, or I don't know him, but he doesn't seem like the type of person who would like waste his time, or like I don't see why he would take an interview if he wasn't seriously considering it. Of course, there's the other way, he could be, but I think it's legitimate, especially this last season, right? I think if you're in his position, you might feel like I need to be done with this college football thing for a little bit, and I just won, so it's not like I have much to prove to anyone except that I can repeat maybe. And this situation is a great one, and that's why that's why everyone has put this together and manifesting it to happen. And yeah, so I think when you ask me like, is the Hardball stuff real? I think it is for sure, and I think it makes a lot of sense. And if the John Spanos told the beat when we talked to him, we have no limitations in salary or experience. He touched on that point. And the job market might change. There's Dallas might open. I don't know what's going on in Philly. Stuff might open, but even if those open, I think this is one of the better ones. So if he wanted to come to the Chargers and the Chargers are serious about not being limited to anything, then they should get him.
Yeah, well, that'll excite fans, and hopefully it does happen for a lot of fans who are very much so all in on this decision. Yeah, it is a great spot, honestly, and I think if you bring in Jim Harbaugh or any of these candidates for an interview, just have like a cardboard cutout of Justin Herbert standing behind you, and just like, I don't know if your team can do that, but here's a cardboard cutout of Justin Herbert.
Nah, it's a good pitch.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's all you needed. Cardboard cutout, and a blank check. That's all you need. The other debate outside of Harbaugh for a lot of fans has been experience versus a first-time head coach. And, obviously Vrabel's available, Belichick is available, but there's also Ben Johnson. For every experienced coach, like let's say a McCarthy, who did lose this past game, there's a Dan Campbell, there's a LaFleur, there's a D'Amico Ryans, etc. Where do you, I don't know if it's stand on the issue is the way to say it, but what is your thoughts, I guess, on experience versus one of these first-time head coaches, particularly obviously an offensive-minded head coach like a Ben Johnson?
Yeah, I think it depends on the experience. I would say it depends what your track record is. I think with Jim or Harbaugh, at least, it's the guy just wins. Like, you know what I mean? Like, he just, like, it's hard. It's hard for you to. It's hard for me, or I think it would be hard for anyone to say, like, if you hire this guy, you think you're going to win because what he's done. That's all he's done as a coach, right? And when you're talking about a first time guy, if you're putting up a Harbaugh to Ben Johnson or whoever you like, right? You're comparing guy who went 44-19 in the NFL, guy who went to the Super Bowl, turned around a Niners team, guy who turned around Michigan. Michigan just won the national championship. It's hard to turn that down, to imagine what someone could do who hasn't done it in my eyes. And I don't know if that's right or wrong, right? Because Ben Johnson could be, I don't know, Vince Lombardi or something, or Don Shula, right? He just needs a chance. But this guy already had one, and he's killed it everywhere. So I think I'm of the vantage point of, I don't think you could say a blanket experience is over a new coach, but when you're talking about experience, at least in Harbaugh's case, I'll take it. I think, for different coaches like McCarthy, I think that's a different thing, right? Like his experience, it's been, he's fluctuated from bad to good. It's been a lot of inconsistencies. In that scenario, I might go with a younger coach. But so I don't know. I don't think it's a blanket statement of like automatically you go young or automatically you go experience.
I think that's a totally fair assessment there. We've had a lot of conversations about, kind of maybe balancing like the next thing versus the thing that, and I think that could apply to, the GM search, the head coaching search. But either way, we're excited to see obviously what comes. Should be an exciting, next week or so for the Chargers. And we're thrilled to, read how you cover this approach. So, Kris, thanks so much for joining us today. Where can Chargers fans go and find you, and maybe a sneak peek of some upcoming stories that you might have?
Yeah. I'm on Twitter at Kris Rhim 1, KrisRhim 1, and Threads. If you're on there, Kris Rhim, trying to get my threads up. I don't have a lot of followers on there, so. But yeah, that's me. And moving forward, I was working on this thing about Justin's how he's growing as a leader this year, and then he got hurt. So at some point, I think I'll have that coming. And then I got some other stuff in the can I don't want to say, but yeah, we got some stuff coming.
All right. Can't wait to see it. Again, thank you so much for joining us today. Chargers fans, cannot recommend Kris's work enough. Please go follow him, show him some love. He's been a great addition to the beat, and we are very excited to visit with him later on. So, Kris, thanks so much, man. We'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, thank you.